Well, no trial, no testimony, no appeals for Bryan Kohberger after pleading guilty to the murder of 4 University of Idaho students. He will be sentenced 2 weeks from today, and we're now getting a look at his handwritten confession. Criminal defense attorney Donna Rotunno joins us now. So this is the document that was filed with the court, signed by Bryan Kohberger. We'll put it up on the screen. The top count is his admission to burglary, and then the second count says, I hereby admit responsibility to count 2, murder in the first degree, which requires the following elements. November 13th, 2022 in Latah County, state of Idaho, the willful, unlawful, deliberate, with premeditation and with malice aforethought, killing and murder of Madison Mogen. He repeats that for Kayla Goncalves, Anna Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin as well. But Donna, missing here is the why, or what led up to that night. And if we don't know the why and how this came to be, it leaves a very big piece of the puzzle unanswered.
For sure, and I think the problem is we will never most likely know the why. And I know that that's such a horrible pill for the families to swallow, anybody who has been victimized by this, anybody who knew those girls, the community at large. But, you know, really, John, the problem is in these circumstances, most often we don't know the why. If this case were to go to trial, we may have never known the why. The likelihood of Mr. Kohberger ever taking the stand in his own defense was very, very slim, I would say. I just don't imagine any scenario in which he would have taken the stand, and those answers would have come from a trial or otherwise. I do think that the prosecutors, as part of this plea, could have asked for some type of a statement from him. They clearly did not do that, but even had a trial happened, I'm not so sure we would have had that answer.
Well, as you point out, the prosecutors could have done it. I imagine the judge probably could have gotten involved in that as well, because there's also a public safety aspect of this. Sure. If you don't know what triggered this, if you don't know the background to this, was it something that happened between one of the 4 or all of the 4 and Bryan Kohberger? Was there a particular triggering event that could have been avoided? I mean, from a public safety standpoint, if you don't get inside the head of a murderer and you know why they did what they did, then you have no way of trying to prevent something like that in the future with somebody else.
Sure, but I will submit to you, John, that in this situation, first of all, in terms of the judge, I don't think the judge could have or would have gotten involved. Had the judge said, I am only accepting this plea if Mr. Kohberger answers some questions, the defense could have been jumping up and down about the fact that he has no obligation to do so. The prosecutors then would have had to make the decision, are they willing to tank the plea in order for that to happen? I also would hope that if the prosecutors had some idea about the why, they would have put that in that very long proffer that they read to the court, where they seem to be making a lot of excuses as to why there was no trial in this matter. But if they do have that information, it either should have been spread of record, or they should at least be sitting down with those families and having a discussion about what those issues truly are.
Yeah, because you remember the family of Natalee Holloway, and I know the circumstances of the court cases are all different, but the family of Natalee Holloway did not know what happened to her until Joran van der Sloot, as part of an agreement that he signed to go into that court proceeding that he was in, said, okay, I'll tell you what happened to her. And at least they didn't get their daughter back. They didn't really get justice on the murder, but they at least had some idea of closure because they knew what happened. Now you've got these 4 families who are forever going to wonder why.
Absolutely. And maybe there were conversations about this that we're unaware of where it comes to Mr. Kohberger. Maybe the government asked the defense attorneys if they would be willing to get into those issues. And maybe no one has the answers. Maybe Mr. Kohberger has been unwilling to give those answers. I think in that case of Mr. van der Sloot, he was charged with other crimes, and he was trying to save himself in other matters as well. So I think that was probably part of a package deal to not have more serious charges brought against him. But nonetheless, the problem here is that we probably really never will get the answers, unless maybe someday he writes a book or sells his rights to a movie or something. But otherwise, I don't see us getting those answers. Well,
because of the plea, he will be allowed to live and potentially avail himself of those options. Well, at least the family will get to say something in victim statements coming up 2 weeks from today when he's sentenced. Donna, great to catch up with you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.